Alright, hi everybody. Welcome to our first video lesson of the year. So, here's how this is going to work. At the beginning of each video, I'm going to tell you what the plan is. Throughout the course of the video, I am going to explain different material, but there are going to be certain times where I'm going to say that you should pause. And when I say that you should pause, I don't mean that like for funsies. I mean that in order to learn and in order to process information, we have to take a moment to let our brains think about what we have just heard. Okay, so when I ask you to pause, I want you to genuinely do that, okay? So here's the plan for today. Today, we're going to do a lot of review, okay? So the first goal is just to remember what it means to be something called an equation. The next thing is going to be to remember what it means to be something called a linear equation, okay? The third thing is going to be to review some characteristics, okay? Some traits of lines, mainly their slopes and their intercepts that are at the x and y axis. So, without further ado, just a little heads up, as you're working, you should be taking notes. You should have either some paper or you should have the notes for today printed. You should be using a pencil, maybe have some colors to highlight. It wouldn't be bad to have a binder so you keep things organized, and a calculator in case you need to do any maths. Okay, so this is the first situation in which I'm going to ask you to pause in a moment, and I won't always write the word pause on the screen. But what I want you to do is I want you to, whether you have, these printed or not, I want you to make a little table, and I want you to basically decide each of these items over here on the left. Either is, yes, is, or is not, no, is not an equation. All right, I want you to separate them into the haves and the have-nots. Which ones are and which ones aren't equations. So pause, and then when you come back after you unpause, you'll see whether or not you were right. Hey everybody, all right, so hopefully you took a minute to try this on your own. By the way, part of the reason for this is because you need to see what you would have answered without my assistance, okay, and see where you may have made some small mistakes. Because hopefully what you did was you picked all of these things that have an equal sign, okay? Sometimes we robotically, once we get into, the middle of the year, we're doing math and we aren't paying attention to the details. And the details are the key pieces of mathematics, all right? If you're detail-oriented, then, that's a key part to being successful at math. So what makes something an equation? It has an equal sign. That is an equation. The first part of the word equation means equal, all right? If you don't see an equal sign, then it's not an equation, all right? You need to know what's an equation. These things, these first two things right here, these are called expressions, all right? If you are expressing yourself, perhaps. That's expressing some information, but it's not an equation. And this guy right here, this is what we call an inequality. It literally means it's not equal. Okay, it's like the definition, the poster child of not being an equation. So that is inequality, okay? Things that are equations and only equations have an equal sign, okay? And like I said, the type of equal sign equation that we are going to be talking about today is a linear kind. So it would be really great of you if you wrote down this equation, y equals mx plus b, in your notes. And as a reminder, the letter M stands for slope and B stands for the y-intercept. Okay, it's a whole Latin thing. If you're wondering, where does that come from? Why are those letters the letters for slope-intercept form? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at this equation, y equals mx plus b, and we're going to look at an actual linear equation. So the letter M is always multiplied by x. So if you look at this number, 1/4, that is in the exact same location as the letter M. So what is the slope? The slope is 1/4 for this equation, okay? And the y-intercept is the letter B. So that's going to be this number at the end of the equation. So in this situation, B, that y-intercept, is -1, okay? Now there's this other thing that's called an x-intercept, and we're going to talk about where that is in a second. But first, I just want to show you, this axis right here, this vertical axis, is the y-axis, and this point right here is your y-intercept. It is where the equation intersects or intercepts, whichever word makes more sense to you, the y-axis. And if I count up 1 over 1, 2, up 1, over 1, 2, 3, 4, so over 4, do you see this point right here? First off, that's 1 and 4, that's a fourth. That's your slope. That point on the x-axis, that's your horizontal axis, is your x-intercept. So that's located at 4, all right? Now to be really, really good, technically you might want to say that this point is at 0, -1, and this point's at 4, 0, if you wanted to be real fancy. Now hopefully that is review. If it is not, hopefully the color coding and, identification of the letter M in the equation, or perhaps counting in the graph, has helped you to see that. So I would like you to try, I'm sorry, I forgot I needed to scroll. I would like you to try this practice problem for me, and then I will talk a little bit about vocab. But please try this practice problem. All right, folks, hopefully you have gotten started on figuring out either the slope from the equation or from the graph. By the way, I just wanted to show you, even if you didn't have this equation, you could figure out the y-intercept, for example, just by going down the y-axis and finding this point. Finding the place where the graphs intersect the axis. And so that's at -1. And then you could look for another point along that line. See, I found another point that crosses at these grid lines, and you could just count the slope if you wanted to. So the slope's 3/5, or you could look at the equation. It's up to you. Whatever. Some people are more visual. Some people might get a little annoyed at the x-intercept because it's not, it's not like a nice round answer, intercept. So maybe there's no x-intercept. No, there is. It's between 1 and 2. Right? And it looks like it's closer to 2. So I'm going to go with, I'm going to say 1.8. If you said something bigger than 1.5 and less than 2, then you're good. You're totally fine. That's why I said estimate. Sometimes we're not going to be exact. Sometimes it's not going to be perfect. And we're going to need to estimate or approximate, and that's okay. All right, but we use the information. We make an educated guess. We just don't say a random number. We look at the information given to us. Okay, so vocabulary. Just to recap, the slope, hopefully we've heard this term before, is the variable m, I'm just going to put that in parentheses, is the rate of change of a linear equation. Okay, it is calculated by taking y2 minus y1 and dividing it by x2 minus x1. Some might call it the change in y over the change in x. It's basically how the two variables change, okay? The y-intercept is the point where a line or curve or anything crosses the y-axis, and it will always be at 0, some number. It's always going to be the case. And then the x-intercept is basically the same thing. It's the point where a line or curve or function of any kind crosses the x-axis, because there's an x-axis and a y-axis, and that's always going to be at some number, 0. Okay? So, and if you look at that, that's true. Like this point right here is, again, it's 0, -1, and this guy, this purplish one, is 1. You'd go 1.8 first, and then 0. By the way, just one other, comment to make maybe is just as a reminder, all points are x comma y in the grid. And you go to this point first, and then you count this second, okay? Like first and second. So if you wanted to graph the point 7, 3, you would go right, that's not going to fit on this grid, 6, 3. You'd go, right 6 and then up 3. You'd go, that's how you would do that, okay? Just in case we needed a reminder on that. All right, last problem in our introduction to linear equations. So suppose you're saving $40 a week. I always like to underline information that I think is going to be important, which is usually numbers. You are saving $40 per week from money earned at a part-time summer job. You're saving up to buy tickets to a music festival. Oh, I can only hope that you're socially distancing at that music festival. And the tickets are going to cost $275. Okay. How many weeks will you have to work in order to have enough money to buy the tickets? Assuming you get permission, from your parents to go. So let's just say in total, we need $275. Okay, so take a second and just think about how much money you'd have, each week, and put that in this table and see what you get. Okay, so here's what I did. If I was saving $40 a week, I'm assuming that, that first week I save $40, and then each week after that I add another $40. So as I keep going, it looks like right here, after 7 weeks, I have $280. So I have enough dollars to pay for these tickets. So how many weeks will you have to work? To answer that question, you'll need to work 7 weeks to afford those tickets. Now, how does this relate? Like, in case you're curious how this relates to linear equations, anytime you add the same quantity, this is called a constant change. That means you have a linear situation, a linear scenario. So, anytime maybe you get an allowance or you have money that you earn and it's consistent from week to week, that would definitely fall into a linear category. And it doesn't necessarily have to be every week. It could be every month or every 2 weeks or something like that. It's the same amount. There are many things that fall into this constant pattern. It doesn't just have to be money, but money's a really, I think, relatable example for us to help understand this idea. So hopefully we've gotten a little bit of a refresher on the things that we had: recognizing an equation, equal sign, identifying equations that are linear, so those are things to the first power, slope, x, y intercepts, all those vocab terms. Hopefully we've got a good handle on that. And we got to model linear equations using that example where we were trying to buy tickets for the music festival. All right, thank you so much for listening. Until next time, folks. Bye.